Welcome to Wales Tech Week 2021. Thank you to our partners. Enjoy the session.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the main stage on day 3 of what has so far been an incredibly successful Wales Tech Week. I'm Davies, Managing Director of Davlec Limited and Agrioecosystems in Welsh Pool Mid Wales. I also sit on the board of Technology Connected, so I've had a front row seat while Avril, Sophie, Liz and the team have pulled together this very impressive event. I'm sure we'd like to thank all of them. This afternoon, we're going to be discussing the challenges of 21st century farming, and as I'm sure we all know, there are plenty of those. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about some of the solutions our two speakers have to offer. First up, we have Mariecia Fraser, head of the Peyran Upland Research Centre at Aberystwyth University, and they'll be speaking about developing technologies for grassland systems. Following up, we're going to have Sean Smith, co-founder and commercial director at Micron Agritech, who'll be joining us from Dublin to speak about problems caused by parasites in grazing animals and how the diagnostic technology that's being developed at their company can help. When both presentations have concluded, I'll be hosting a Q&A session with both of our speakers, so feel free to drop any queries you have in the chat, and we'll cover them then. So take it away, Mariecia.
Thank you very much, Nia. So this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about potential for precision farming and grassland systems. So I was asked in particular to talk about precision farming. And so this is a collaborative venture between myself. I'm the one with the farming background, land management background, and my colleagues, Dr. Ben Roberts and Dr. Fred Labrosse, who are both from the Department of Computer Science at Aberystwyth University. And it's a really exciting opportunity for us to bring these disciplines together and look for ways in which technology can actually be rolled out into our grassland systems. So why grassland? Well, there's been a lot of technological and precision farming development aimed at arable systems. And at the same time, when it comes to relatively intensive livestock systems, such as dairy systems, there have been a lot of new developments there. But beef and sheep farming, which are the predominant sectors in Wales, haven't had those advantages as yet. And yet when it comes to Wales, this is a little diagram here of agricultural land use. So you can see that the land cover is dominated by grass in Wales. So there's a real opportunity for new technology, new developments to make a big difference to typically Welsh farming systems. So thinking a little bit more about grassland, we've got 3 different types. We've got temporary grassland, which is usually categorised as anything less than 5 years old. And so these are pastures that are reseeded fairly regularly, often as part of arable rotations. And then we've got permanent pasture, which is categorised as grassland over 5 years old. This has been improved, it's often been ploughed and reseeded, but in a lot of cases, that was done a long time ago. So the swards and the pastures we have now might be 20, 30, 40, even 50 years old. And then the third class then is what we call semi-natural grassland. This is the rough grazing that you see on top of the hills, where there's been no cultivation, but the plant species that are there are very much driven by the management we've imposed on these areas. And that's why they're called semi-natural, because we've had such an impact through the management we've put on these areas. In terms of production efficiency and output, it's the temporary grasslands that yield the greatest product. But then conversely, if we're thinking about other public goods, then there's an increase as we move through the permanent pasture into the semi-natural grassland. So what are these public goods that we're delivering in addition to primary production? Well, biodiversity is obviously a topic of great concern at the moment, with State of Nature reports showing that we've got a lot to do to support nature recovery in Wales and in the UK globally. So biodiversity is important. We're now understanding just how important carbon management is as well. If we can lock up carbon in soils, then we can counteract some of the emissions. And certainly with some soil types, we really don't want to be disturbing them because we don't want to be releasing more. Water supply and water management are other key goals and goods that grasslands can strongly influence. 70% of our drinking water comes from upland areas and is filtered through the agricultural systems that we have in place. And the same with water management. If we are going to have more extreme events, then grasslands are going to play a key role in soaking up some of that water when it arrives and helping to slow the flow to lower lying areas, preventing flooding in those places. And at the same time, we've got a recreation tourism industry that's dependent on the backdrop that we have. So these are what we're expecting in terms of public goods, and they speak directly to those 21st century challenges of how do we lower emissions, how do we manage, both mitigate and adapt for climate change, and how do we support the biodiversity concerns that we all have today. So I'm just going to go through some of the research and developments that can support our goals with grasslands. And thinking about the temporary grasslands to start with, this is where we are introducing different species of plant, different varieties of grasses and clovers. And so there's a real opportunity for forage breeding to make a big difference. And I've got a range of colleagues in the university that have made huge advances in our understanding of the genetics behind the selection of different plants and different varieties within understanding the plant traits, whether it's to do with the growth above ground or whether it's the structure of the rooting system underneath. So by choosing the right plants for the right place, we can start to make a big difference to what's happening with some of these more frequently changed pastures. And to do that, there's been a revolution in the type of technologies that research uses. So we've got research in both genetics and genomics, which is understanding the DNA code, knowing what is the blueprint within those different plants. And then there's this other complementary discipline of phenomics, understanding what the code does, particularly under different circumstances. So if plants are exposed to dry conditions or flooding, to nutrient stress, how does the plant respond? How does it use its DNA? And how is that transcribed into what grows in our fields? So there's a lot of development happened here, and all this can help to speed up creation of new varieties and also make sure that they are adapted to the climate we might be going to experience, as well as the conditions we have today. So this is really the bread and butter of the Institute of Biological and Environmental Sciences at Rural Sciences at Aber. The core plant breeding work there is incredibly important. But then I'm going to move on now to some of the more precision farming type things that we've been working on. And some of that's then about taking material from those really controlled laboratory and glasshouse situations and taking them out into the real world. And so this is an example here of where we've been using imaging of plots as they've been established. So these were different mixtures of grasses and legumes. And we've got three different images here. We've got the first one, which was taken in the autumn, just after the plants were sown. We then got early spring the following year and later spring. Different plots, different mixtures, with the row of plots right along the top of each. Areas where the ground was disturbed, but there were no seeds actually sown. So we get an idea of what's coming through from the seed bank, what the competition is from existing plants within the field. And so this was an exercise in being able to image and understand the progress as the plants germinate and as the leaves come together and we get canopy closure. And so within these pictures, the green is plant material, and then the orangey colour is non-crop, but is essentially bare ground. And by looking at how quickly mixtures germinate and establish, we can that establishment is a really big first step to the grassland being successful and the plant species and varieties that we sow actually thriving and persisting. So this is at the smaller scale. These plots are 7 by 7 meters, but it's starting to use imaging as a way of tracking change over time. And we can look at a range of different indices there. The next step from that is looking at not only what is growing, not only we've got information on that we've got plants growing, and then so the question is what is actually growing. So this is then automatic segregation of grass and clover. So the image is taken, and then we've got the developing technology to be able to separate that out and to give proportions of grass and clover within the image. And this could be captured either by a drone, or we're also interested in developing autonomous vehicles, so basically robotic vehicles. This is an Agrioecosystems type vehicle that's been adapted, but moving forward, we're more interested in standard ATVs. How can we use those? How can we program those? So they're working across a field autonomously while the farmer is getting on with something else. And with this particular discrimination between grass and clover, we could start to map a field, look at the proportions of each. That clover is so important in terms of providing nutrition to animals as they're either growing or whether they're pregnant or lactating. The high protein in legumes makes a huge difference. And by using legumes like clover, we're also reducing the amount of fertilizer we need. But it is hard for them to persist. So being able to map across a field where they're surviving, where they're not, and then potentially topping up just individual cells within that field to get the clover content back up would make a big difference. And that's what these vehicles could also be adapted for potentially as well, is carrying out some of these routine tasks. The same, so this is grass and clover, but it could also be tailored towards looking at particular problem weed species. Docks are an obvious example, potentially buttercups, nettles, so that again, it's targeting particular plants within the pasture, that in this case to control them rather than to encourage them. Moving on then to the permanent pasture and then particularly the rough grazing. The challenge when it comes to these areas is the size of the enclosures. We're often dealing with areas that are over 100 hectares in size. These are big. And so even the rotary drones struggle in terms of battery life. So for surveying and understanding these sorts of enclosures, we've been using fixed wing drones that we've been able to build for around £500 using off-the-shelf components available in hobby shops. These can fly much more quickly and have a bigger battery, so we're able to do a couple of 100 hectares in 2 flights, which is much more manageable. They're also, with all the pre-programming, they're able to cope with the undulating sites that are often found up in the hills. So you've got big differences in slope and altitude, and they can map the ground. And there we've been interested in understanding the topography, understanding where the water sources are, understanding what different vegetation communities are there, looking at the old-fashioned way of surveying manually. A lot of the maps that you can get from those sorts of phase 1 surveys are pretty limited in terms of the information they can give, whereas mapping with this approach, we can get down to each pixel being 8 centimetres square, So all of a sudden we have so much information about a site. And what we've been doing is using that information to understand where our, in our case, sheep are going in these big enclosures. Where are they going? What's the impact of that grazing? And that particularly ties to using animals to manage for biodiversity and for carbon storage. How can we make sure we would protect some of our more delicate peatland areas? So then we need to know where the animals are. And so for that, we've developed a tracking system using RFID ear tags, and then using that with the drone system again. So the animals are fitted with a tag, and then the drone flies over. It sends out a signal saying, is anybody out there? The tag wakes up and says, yes, I'm here. And by flying a fixed set of routes across the whole area, then we can triangulate as to where those individual animals are. And the tag itself is then just the green and black that in the picture there. It can fit onto the existing management tag. It's not like a collar or anything. It's just a small thing added to the animal. And we could get these produced for around £10 to £12 each. So all of a sudden, we're able to track the whole of a flock. We can afford to collect information on all the sheep in the area, rather than putting one or two more expensive GPS collars on and assuming that our one or two animals are representative of the whole group. So using this information, we've been able to build up heat maps of where the grazing pressure is and isn't, because in some cases we actually want to maybe draw the animals into areas they haven't been using. And from this information, we can say, actually, we use some feed blocks over here or a water supply over there. So this is all now written up and is available. We've done all the verification, and we're now using it in our own experimental work. Taking a step on from that, Ben and Fred have been developing UAV data mules, again based on the drone technology. So the idea is to develop a network of sensors. Those could be static or dynamic, and then using the drone to pick up the information. So it could be sensors on animals, it could be GPS collars, accelerometers, it could be microclimate sensors, or it could be base stations. And it's the same thing again, where the drone flies over and asks if anything's out there, and then these different devices can respond. And then tying into that, there could be a base station that's beside a trough or a water supply. The animals, when they're coming close, their information has been downloaded to that, and then you're then collecting that information either by a drone or with a receiver could also be mounted onto a quad bike or something similar. So all of a sudden we're able to collect a whole load of data from these systems, where before there was very little actual information available about what was happening on the ground. So thinking about the applications we could use this for, as we've been particularly focused on the livestock front, but just general monitoring of stock health and welfare. If we're getting information on which animals are using feed troughs or which are using water supply, we can build up how mobile they are, what resources they're using. We can tie that in with their performance and then look to be able to select out the animals that are more efficient, which again ties into what we're trying to do with agriculture in general, reduce the inputs by improving efficiency. There's also a role in terms of forecasting of disease. So nematovirus is a good example here, where it's very much about, in particular, weather conditions being a risk factor for this parasite. But the information at the moment would come from just a handful of met sites right across Wales. Using microclimate sensors, we'd potentially be able to have information collected for fields on an individual farm, so that the farmer can move his stock to a low-risk field at a time when another field is at high risk. And then we could also use this information for pasture management. So again, microclimate sensors telling us information about the soil temperature, so we can target fertilizer spreading when it's going to be taken up as quickly as possible, reducing nitrous oxide emissions, another potent greenhouse gas. So all these ways, healthy animals produce less methane, more efficient animals produce less methane. Using a fertilizer more efficiently reduces nitrous oxide. So these are all ways we can improve the sustainability of grassland production. So just then, there's a little summary. Grassland farming has, I think, been a Cinderella sector compared to certainly the agricultural industry and the horticultural industry. But there are a range of new technologies in development that are going to change this. And these have the potential to make a big contribution as we try to meet those major 21st century challenges, particularly in relation to achieving net zero for farming. And by doing that, we can improve the environmental as well as the economic and the social sustainability of some of our more marginal areas where farming is under particular pressure. However, the funding to date has largely been for these sort of proof of principle studies I've been mentioning, and we really need major investment now to take this forward and to scale it up to the industry scale. So what we're looking at, this Cinderella sector now needs a fairy godmother with a substantial checkbook. So just to finish, I'd like to thank the colleagues that have contributed to this within the university, and Mark Neal from Tech, who was with the university and now has his own company. And mentioning the GEOM programme there, that's a multi-million-pound initiative funded by EU, but through the Welsh Government, and it's using the technology that's available and the knowledge and expertise within the university to help businesses to develop some of these for their companies. So if anybody's interested then in what some of these colleagues could do for them, then there's the website there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariecia. That was a fascinating presentation. I'm sure we'll direct in the Q&A session later. So, Sean, if you'd like to take over and tell us about your system, that would be great. I think you're still on mute for a second, Sean.
Apologies. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes. And I can see your presentation.
Very good.
Excellent.
You can see it. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Nia. And hello, everybody. So, yeah, I'm from Micron Agritech. We are an Irish startup, and we're driving the future of animal health through on-site rapid diagnostics. So by 2050, it's predicted a 70% increase in calories for consumption is required to meet global demand. But farmers continue to face increase in external constraints. With tech connectivity, it's estimated that the ag industry could contribute an additional $500 billion in global GDP by 2030. But the animal health data that we need to achieve this and this increase in production is still mostly collected through sort of manual lab-based systems dating back to the 1900s. So the agricultural industry, it's faced with an increase in demand, but society is seeking a decrease on environmental impact. So to address these forces, transformation is needed, but the ag's tech landscape is fractured and hasn't yet been embraced. So one of society's key pillars, the ag industry, faces a global challenge, requires innovative, disruptive thinking. So that's why at Micron Agritech, we've gotten together a team of innovators and disruptive thinkers together to start building a platform for the future of animal health. So the Micron mobile platform essentially will take data from three key pillars and we got a really good overview of all the sort of different aspects of data that are being collected on farms from the previous speaker. So that was really good to get that overview. Essentially, the first pillar will be rapid testing. So this is our core technology. It's rapid portable diagnostics, and it's driven through mobile-based technologies, through machine learning, and essentially taking existing laboratory tests that are very manual and automating those, again, through artificial intelligence, machine learning, cutting-edge tech, such as fecal testing or blood testing. The second pillar will be IoT devices. So these would be some devices that, such as this, are currently being used at a relatively wide scale, collecting real-time data to use to drive sort of day-to-day decisions, production increasing decisions. These would be things like scales to track animal weight, water levels, medication use, etc. And then the third pillar would be integrations. So you're looking at APIs that can link in with third parties, so other tech companies, researchers, government, databases, etc. And sort of then all of this fits into the one data loop, and essentially the more data is generated can be used to improve the machine learning and give better insights then to the users. So essentially the data that's currently being generated through labs, it lacks biological context due to a testing system that relies on labs. But with our innovative, portable and rapid testing technologies, health data can be paired with environmental data and to provide a full picture of animal health and bring the industry to the forefront of technology. So basically combining diagnostics with IoT outputs and with historic trends, our AI software stack humanizes that data. So farmers and vets then can make data-driven decisions, improve productivity, increase yields, decrease costs, and improve animal health. So you can see here, all of it just feeds back into that end user. So this is a glimpse at the future, and this is the direction that we are going. But where are we now? So we're currently focused on building our spearhead product, Micron Kit. Allows farmers and vets to rapidly test animals for parasites on site, essentially just using their mobile phone. So parasites are the #1 most common health issue in grazing animals, and they have a big impact on animal yield, on feed efficiency, and some other environmental impacts. But at the moment, if a farmer wants to test their animals for parasites, they would need to take a fecal sample, they would need to send it to a lab where they're going to wait 3 to 5 days generally to get the results back, and this is just way too long. And a farmer's most valuable asset is their time. So what most farmers will do instead of regular testing, they will just routinely medicate the animals with a class of drugs known as anthelmintics or wormers or antiparasitics. But this sort of overuse of medication and medicating without testing is leading to the buildup of resistance, which is causing a lot of issues. So a study done last year here in Ireland found that on 100% of surveyed farms, there was resistance to Lyvamectin, which is one of these common wormers. And similar studies have been done in the UK and Australia and New Zealand, all yielding very similar results, which is quite worrying. So to try and combat this, the EU actually has passed legislation that will come into effect in January of 2022. And they are going to make it so that the medications will be prescription only. So farmers will have to increase the amount of testing that they are doing for parasites, but they're left with this slow and inefficient system. And that's where we come in. So Micron Kit, as I mentioned, is a rapid portable parasite testing kit. So farmers and vets can use it to collect, prepare, and analyze a fecal sample on site and get the results rapidly. It allows them to save time, so they get comprehensive results in under an hour. And they're actually cutting out the time spent on medicating individual animals unnecessarily. They're saving money and increasing profits. So worms actually will decrease feed efficiency and animal productivity. And also this blanket dosing method is ineffective at least 40% of the time. So they're potentially be able to save at least 40% of the money they're currently spending on medication. And targeted treatment, then it decreases costs and increases efficiency as well. And then the third thing is they can reduce resistance. So reducing the use of medication and only using medication when it is absolutely necessary avoids the buildup of resistance. So it allows farmers to take back control of the health of their animals. Pause for a second there to give you a look at our beautiful Micron Reader. So this is a glimpse of the Micron Kit Reader. This is essentially the main piece of kit that is used for the analysis of the samples. So you can see the hole on the top of the unit there. There's a 100 times magnification lens located inside the device. And that looks down upon, if you look at the bottom right there, you can see where the slide gets inserted. And that slide will contain the prepared fecal sample that's going to be tested. And so you'll get a look here at how the device works. So the user's phone, you'll see here, just really quickly and easily lines up with the hole in the attachment there. And the phone just gets placed on top of the reader, and it's a completely hands-free experience, so it stays there. And then the slide, which contains the prepared fecal sample, gets inserted and will automatically move through the device. And you can see there's a channel that runs through the center of the slide. And as that runs through the reader, the phone with the app is taking a video recording of the entire channel. So if there are any parasites present, excuse me, the worms live in the gut of the animal. So if the animal has an infection, the parasite will lay eggs and that will come out in the feces. And that's what we're looking for in these videos. And you can see there across the screen, there's a stronga leg being detected very accurately among all of the debris and bubbles and so on that you get. So this process, the way it actually works is the video that's taken on the phone gets split up into all of the frames or images, and those images are then uploaded to our server. So we have a database of thousands of other images that we have collected and annotated and labeled. So by taking the image from the phone, we're able to compare it to the existing images and detect if there are any parasites present by looking at the shape and size and some different characteristics. Once they're detected, we can then count the entire slide. So it both qualifies and quantifies and gives a result back to the user. So they can essentially make a decision on the spot whether or not they need to treat the animal for worms and what treatment that they need to give. So just a quick overview then of our journey to date. In terms of validation, so far we've tested Micron Kit with over 40 users. And last year we ran a clinical trial with over 1,000 bovine samples with very successful results. In terms of hardware, we've gone through 3 different product iterations and developed and tested with users each time, and also have developed our own custom electronics. We've built out our mobile platform, so we have our app on both the iOS and Android, and we've also built out our AWS cloud infrastructure. We've trained now 3 separate models for the detection of parasite eggs and tested performance. And our current model is processing and giving results back in under 2 minutes, which is unprecedented. In December of 2020, we closed our seed investment round. So we raised €500,000 from a mix of venture capital and animal health companies, which would be about £470,000. And just recently then we were rewarded further funding from the Welsh Government for an ovine research project in collaboration with MSpark that is underway and is really exciting. And then, so since the funding, our team has grown now from just 4 founders to over 10 employees. And we're currently now hiring again. We're looking for developers in Wales. So my call to anybody watching this, if you are a developer or know a developer that is looking to work for a really exciting animal health startup, then please do have a look at our socials for the ad there and apply. So thank you very much. I will stop talking now, and I believe there's going to be some questions.
Thank you both for your presentations. Really, really interesting stuff. So I think maybe a good place to start with the questions for both of you is at the moment, particularly the media are very fond of demonizing agriculture and what it does to our environment, and there's a lot of pressure put on farmers from that direction as well. So how do you think, as people working in technological advancement in agriculture, we can do better to get the message out there about the amount of investment and time and effort that's being put into trying to improve our processes and the kind of hard work that we're doing, so that people are aware that we are working on their food supply and how to improve it?
Absolutely, and obviously there's been a lot of controversy in the last few weeks regarding trade deals and things that might be happening in the future with regard to food from other sources. And yes, there probably is, there always has been, but I think it's probably even more pressing now, a need to make sure that consumers are fully informed about where their food comes from and the processes that have been used to produce it, so that they can make a judgment themselves as to whether they're prepared potentially to have to pay a little bit more for produce that's been produced in such a way as to not cause environmental damage and that upholds the very best standards of animal health, which is what the UK and Wales in particular does already. So yeah, there's a need now to bang our own drum a little bit on the quality of what's produced. But having said that, all farming, we can all do a little bit more in terms of just making sure that everything is, particularly with regards to inputs, that everything is required, and look for every last way of improving efficiency. And this is where the sorts of product that Sean's talking about is excellent, because it's getting away from that just routine drenching, routine way of management, and targeting what's needed when it's needed. And it's the same with other inputs as well.
I agree 100%, Mariecia. Have you got further comment as well, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I can only slightly add to what Mariecia said there. Sums it up very well. I think really the key, as I think we both touched on heavily in our presentations, is in the data. You know, the data can be used to increase efficiency, but it can also be used to inform consumers. So to be able to understand completely what you're consuming, where exactly it has come from, and you know, you start as we are collecting more data and integrating more tech into farming, we'll see consumers, you know, at the consumer level understanding, you know, if they have a piece of meat, they'll understand all of the different medication that it's received throughout its history and all of the different tests that have been done. And that level of transparency is what we need to educate the consumers as well, as what Mariecia touched on. So I think that is the direction we're going. And it's really great to see, like, the Welsh government putting a lot of initiative into, you know, encouraging innovation within ag tech. So the funding that we received actually came just through a competition called AgriHack, and it really just encourages innovators to get together and use the cutting edge technology we have in machine learning and AI to solve problems within agriculture. And I think we should hopefully see more of that, you know, throughout Ireland and the UK and Europe, to really encourage innovation.
So as people that work in obviously two separate sectors of what we're looking at the moment, somebody who works in industry and somebody who works from a more academic perspective, do you think that it's important with helping in efficiencies in farming and improving it to work together between industry and then the farmers and people working in academia to get to a solution that helps everybody? Because I know in certain sectors it's hard to make those things work together. Do you think that's different in farming? Do you think that there's a good collaboration atmosphere already?
Absolutely, we do need those collaborative links, and we need to include the end users as well, because we don't want to over-engineer things and then not actually happen, because we all know farmers are really pushed for time, and there may be other limitations as well around the technologies available in terms of broadband or mobile phone reception that can limit things. And certainly my colleagues in computer science have been bearing that in mind when they've been doing development. They haven't assumed that people are going to have 4G. They're not assuming there's even a mobile reception. So, but I think it's where, and the funding tends to be now, there is this emphasis on academia working with business. And I think that's a really good thing, because it gives business access to the expertise and some of the infrastructure that comes with a university that it would be really hard to replicate for a business. It's just expensive pieces of kit and computers and all those sorts of things. And at the same time, it gives researchers like myself real world challenges to, you actually want to make a difference with what you do, and working with business is a great way of achieving that.
What about you, Sean? Do you guys work with academia?
Yeah, we do, and actually, yeah, so it's a core of what we do. We are originally a spin-out of Technological University here in Dublin. So, I mean, we started off as a project in university, and so it's really interesting to see how that journey has progressed. And I think the key is, again, it comes down to encouragement. We have lots of great research going on in universities, but we need to be encouraging that research then to be, you know, through entrepreneurship programs and incubators, and governments funding the universities to facilitate that. Because, yeah, the researchers need to be able to understand, you know, link in with the commercial people in the universities and talk to the end users as well, and the consumers, and sort of understand what the market need is as well. And that's what drives the innovation. So again, we're starting to see more and more of that, but I think there's a lot more can be done to encourage that innovation and entrepreneurship coming out of the universities.
So I've got a couple of great questions in the comments from Ben. The first one is, to what extent can improvements in animal feed alter the macro animal health picture?
So we know a lot about what requirements different types of livestock, different age classes of livestock have. The driver has been about being able to supply more of that from a forage-based diet. We can grow forage plants really well in the UK. We struggle to, particularly in Wales, to grow some of the higher protein grain crops that concentrate diets, that bought-in feed tend to rely on. So soya that's a major component of low-bagged feed. It's grown abroad. There are issues about consumer confidence with GM and things that have to be taken into account as well. And buying in those sorts of feeds is a big variable cost for the farmer. So if we can grow more of our own protein in particular, but have the nutrient requirements coming from the forage, and then matching the energy and the protein in that forage so it's used as efficiently as possible. The thing with when you're feeding ruminants like cattle and sheep, the thing we have to remember is you're not feeding the animal directly, you're feeding this great vat of microbes that do the digesting, the breaking down of the grass for them. They can't digest grass directly any better than we can. They rely on those bugs. And so we're feeding the bugs and making sure that the bugs are getting what they need in terms of matching energy and protein to be able to make microbial protein, which is then what's actually digested by the animal. So, but getting the feeding right avoids a whole range of metabolic diseases that we know quite a lot about, but maybe it is about matching requirements rather than and matching requirements through things we can grow ourselves. That's the challenge.
Interesting stuff. And then Ben's second question for both of you. Farming is often, rightly or wrongly, perceived as an old school, conservative, risk-averse industry. Is this an unfair characterization? Relatedly, how do we support the adoption of these technologies within the farming industry? And as someone who's worked in agriculture for 19 years now, I can only agree with what Ben's asking. But yes, I would like your comments on that, please.
Yeah. I have to say, I think in recent years, I'd have to say it is an unfair characterization at this stage. Perhaps, again, as we're seeing more and more farmers educate themselves and go through, farmers' sons that are going and studying science in university and coming back to farming sort of hungry to adapt technology, and because at the end of the day they want to increase their efficiency and increase their profits. So I'm starting to see, anyway, dealing more and more with younger farmers in Ireland and Wales, there's a lot more hunger than maybe there was previously to adopt new technologies. But I suppose on the second part of the question, how do we support the adoption of these technologies? I do think a certain amount of onus there falls on us as the innovators and the researchers to understand the needs and make it as easy as possible for the technologies to be adopted and remove barriers. So, a barrier to new technology might be cost. So, understanding what commercialization structure is going to work for the users and also enable you to make a profit and innovate further. So I do think a certain amount of onus falls on us to do the education there.
It's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I agree with what Sean's saying about there is in some ways there's always been a generation that's gone to the colleges and universities, come home with good ideas. Whether they're the decision maker and the farm is a completely different question, and so implementing some of that can be perhaps a bit of a challenge. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial and say, for a lot of farmers, it's quite easy to settle into a way of doing things that has always been.
I'm not sure that's just true of farmers. I think that might just be people in general.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. And the best one in the world, it's the payment schemes that will drive the change, because there's so much of what is done and the way things are done are tied into particularly the agri-environment schemes. Changing them fundamentally would change the way things happen. And as part of that, incentivising this. But within Wales, we're developing this new scheme that is supposedly centred around sustainable land use. So we've already touched upon it's gathering that data to be able to make the good decisions that help support that sustainability. Otherwise, there's an element of very educated, but it's still educated guesswork, because you're relying on people's knowledge of the land and the animals, and they're filling in gaps. If we have hard data from things like parasite testing regularly, then we can just modify what's happening enough to make a big change. So it's targeting the management. It may not change things completely, but it might just make things more tailored to individual farms. And in doing that, we can improve the overall efficiency. And improving efficiency gives us wins of economic, environmental, and then if the economic works, then we get the social sustainability as well.
So I think both of you made points about the funding in Wales for innovation in agritech being a real plus point of being associated with agriculture in Wales. Why do you think there is such a push forward for innovation and collaboration on this kind of things in Wales particularly? And you find that really true. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'm just asking the question.
I suppose there may be other schemes in other countries. I can't really talk to them, but I suppose in Wales, because Wales is there's less physical difference perhaps between academia and business. It's easier for us to collaborate, and there's also closer links perhaps with the people that are in a position in government to actually target some funding towards these things as well. But it has potential to make big difference. It's been a very good thing, and hopefully it'll carry on.
Brilliant. Well, I don't know if anybody else has any further points that they'd like to make. If not, then thank you everybody for your time. It's been really interesting hearing what you're up to. I look forward to seeing how you progress, Sean, with what's happening and looking at your research further, Mariecia. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it too. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Wales Technology Week.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Rewatch all of our sessions online. Thank you to our partners.